afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Yun Lu. Thank you for joining the weekly educational talks on Thursday at 3 p.m. The talks are organized by CAPA HC, Chinese American Parent Association of Howard County. And this event is sponsored by COED, Howard County Community Organizations Active in Disaster. So today, Ms. Janice Winter and Ms. Amanda Sullivan will present frogs in our watershed. The suggested audience is kindergarteners to 5th graders. Both Ms. Janice Winter and Ms. Amanda Sullivan are environmental educators from Howard County Conservancy. Howard County Conservancy has designed several programs for ages 5 to 8 and 9 to 12. And so let's welcome Ms. Janice and Ms. Amanda.
Hi, everybody. We're glad to see you here today.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm going to start talking. I'm going to share my screen so y'all can see some nice pictures, okay?
Yeah, and if Ms. Janice or Ms. Amanda asks you any question, you can type in the chat, okay? You can answer the questions by type in the chat. Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to talk today about frogs that live in your watershed. All right. Let's see if I can get my screen to do what I'm supposed to do. There we go. Okay, frogs. Frogs are a special kind of an animal called an amphibian. Amphibians are animals that spend their life sometimes in the water. They have to live underwater, and then they can change and grow and live on the land. So they start their life out as a tadpole, and they have to swim underwater and breathe with gills, and they change over time. They grow legs and they grow lungs, and they come out of the water, and then they have to breathe air on the land. So that's special about amphibians. So here's a picture that shows the eggs that are laid underwater, and they hatch out to be tadpoles, and the tadpoles grow and change and become frogs, and these frogs breathe air with their lungs. So frogs in our watershed are an important part of our food web. They eat insects like flies and mosquitoes, and I have a nice garden at my house, and I love to see frogs in my garden because they're eating the insects that might be eating my plants. They are not eating any plants. So that's what frogs eat, a lot of insects. So because they're also part of the food web in that other things eat them. So birds like this blue heron could be looking for frogs in their environment to eat. So frogs over time have developed various adaptations that allow them to live in our watershed, all right? So they have special eyes that allow them to swim underwater. They have clear eyelids. They can swim so they can see underwater, and they have eyes that stick out of their head a little bit so that they can be mostly underwater and have their eyes sticking out so they can look out and see what's going on above the water. So that's two things that they have that help them to live in our watershed. And some frogs live in trees, and they have specialized feet for where they live. So this particular frog over here, where my arrow is pointing, has sticky feet that allow them to climb trees and live on the underneath side of branches and things so they can hide from any predators that might be looking for them. And this particular frog swims in the water, so he has webbing between his toes so he can swim faster and get away from any predators, this one too. So if they are swimming in the water, they can go much faster if they have webbed feet. So frogs can escape. They can jump 10 times their body length. So this is a bullfrog. He's about 5 inches long, and he can jump 50 inches. So he can scare away his predators by jumping far away from them and startling them. So that's one of their adaptations. They have very strong leg muscles. And their skin is another special adaptation. It allows them to blend and camouflage in their environment. So this particular frog up here lives in a pond and is kind of green and blends in with anything that lives, the plants that live in and around the pond. And this frog lives in trees, and so he likes to blend in with the branches and the trunk of the trees. And another special thing about frog skin is that their skin allows them to breathe in oxygen when they're in the water. So they have very sensitive skin, sensitive to the water quality that's around them. So let me know if you have any questions about frogs. Now we're going to talk a little bit about a special thing that frogs do. They make sounds, and sometimes we hear those sounds at night, right? And so frogs, these little tiny animals, make sounds that you can hear almost a mile away. So how do they make such a loud sound? One way they do it is they use their vocal cords, and they have this big puff that they expand their skin and make like a drum, and it amplifies the noise. So what I want you to do is hold your throat and say, ah, and you can feel your vocal cords, all right? Can you do that? Ah, right? So that's how they make their sound. They have vibrating vocal cords just like we do, and they put it into this large pouch of skin that makes it amplify. And every species of frog has a different noise. So what we're going to do next is learn different sounds that they make, and then we're going to be like scientists. Lots of scientists learn the different frog sounds, and then they go out into the field at night and listen and see what frogs they might hear. So I'm going to play some sounds for you, and you're going to listen for them, because at the end we have a little game where you get to guess what sound it is. So let's try this one. This is the American toad. All right, so American toad, did you hear that loud trilling sound? That is the American toad, all right? And then there's the wood frog. I'm going to show you a picture of a wood frog. And I'm going to find the sound of a wood frog. Here we go. Okay, so that doesn't sound a bit like a toad, right? That one sounds more like a duck to me. What do you think? All right, so here we go with the spring peeper, is another unique sound. That is a very small frog that makes a very loud sound. And you can hear that sound. A lot of people can hear that sound right in their own yards here in Howard County. So next up is the bullfrog. There he is. All right, let's listen. All right, so there's another unique sound, and here's this picture. All right, bullfrogs are very big frogs, and they live in ponds, and they make a very low, deep sound. All right, and the next up is our gray tree frog. All right. So now what we're going to do is, these are the 5 frogs that we've learned. So you've got them in your brain, you've heard them all. We're going to, I'm going to play a sound, and you're going to guess in the chat box what frog you think it is. And then we'll see how we do. All right. So first up is this sound I'm going to play for you. Okay, so do we have anybody in the chat box?
I saw 2 answers. Tree frog.
Tree
Oh,
frog.
2 answers. Yeah, gray tree frog.
Okay, that's it. That is the gray tree frog sound. Okay, so are you ready for another one? That was great. Good job, guys. Ready? Here's another one. Okay,
Yeah, we got some answers.
okay,
Bullfrog.
very good.
Bullfrog.
Bullfrog, yeah, that was a good one. Good job, guys. All right, ready for the next one? Here we go. Okay.
The little frog.
Okay. You have any guesses?
Yeah, we got some answers.
Good.
All right,
Pepper.
very good. Good job, guys.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next page.
The little frog. It's a little frog.
That is a little frog, you're right.
Yes. I hate that. Sorry.
Okay. Have any guesses? Want to hear it again?
Yes.
Okay. Uh-oh.
It's like little frog. D&D music.
This one is tough.
Okay. So that is the American toad.
American toad.
American toad. All right. Well,
Todd is like a
here we go. We got another one. We're ready? Oh, I got a game going on here. Any guesses for that one?
more sound. Wood frog.
Okay, good job.
Wood frog.
All right, there we go. Wood frog. Now we have one. It's a repeat, so that makes it a little trickier. But it's one you've heard.
I think that's a black or gray frog.
All right. That is the American toad again. And those you might hear in your own yard, so it's important to know. Then you can impress all your friends and family that you know the sound of that, what's making that sound. All right. Okay, so that was fun to play. And now I'm going to turn over the screen to my friend Amanda Sullivan, who's going to show you some things. She has some interesting friends that she's brought in from outside just to show you. So I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, thank you, everyone. Dr. Yun, I don't know if you know how to do this, but if you can make my video screen large, then I can introduce everybody to some friends that I brought along to share with us today.
Yeah, I already made you the spotlight video so everyone can see you.
Spotlight. Okay, so I am showing you right now a little glass bowl that has some black specks swimming around. And what is in here are teeny tiny little tadpoles that I found in a puddle on a walk with my dog just a couple days ago. And we pulled them out of the puddle because the puddle was almost dry. So we're gonna wait for a rain and then we're gonna put them back in. We won't keep them the whole time. But these are spring peeper tadpoles. You can see them kind of swimming around. And tadpoles are uniquely shaped. They don't look entirely like fish. The way you can tell the difference is that they have a very round, bulky body and then a long, thin tail. Now, some of them do look more like fish, but the spring peeper ones like this definitely do not really look like fish. And they don't have fins like fish. They don't have a dorsal fin on their back, and they don't have side fins. They really just have the tail. So they are good swimmers, but they're not great swimmers. So they have to live in particular places. And I'm going to
Oh,
introduce.
can you hold them up? We can't see them.
You can't. So I'll try. I was trying to lean this down because if I move the glass, that's a little bit better. They are. So keep an eye on rain puddles, especially those that stick around, because you never know what you're going to find. On those same days, we saw some little turtles in puddles, actually. Not a great spot for baby turtles, but you can find all kinds of things when you're looking in puddles. And then my daughter is going to show you somebody else who we found just last night. What's his name, Rosalie?
We're calling him Rebound because when we caught him, he kept jumping against the tank and bouncing off.
Can anybody tell what sort of frog or toad he is? That is an American toad. You can see the bump right behind his eye. That's a giveaway for a toad. They have these bumps that are like glands. They're kind of like sweating. They can sweat out of those glands, and what comes out of them is actually poisonous to things like dogs and cats. So they have some defense mechanism because they're not very graceful on land, but they do something else that's very good. They hide very well. You can find them on wood piles, among your garden. They really are kind of everywhere. They can be out in the day or the night. We fed Rebound some juicy worms that we caught in our garden to make sure that he had enough food. They do eat a lot. This guy is probably only about a year old. He's little. They'll grow to about twice that size. The big ones, the females get bigger than So I'm not seeing any questions on the chat box, but if you have a question, you're welcome to ask it. This one will be ready to lay eggs or mate with a female in another year or two. So he's still a teenager toad, if you will. So we will put him back in his cage, in his little box. We're going to release him later. We just kept track of him so that you could see a friend on our program today. And if you have any questions about him, let me know.
I saw there's one question asked earlier. What is the difference between toad tadpoles and frog tadpoles?
So generally speaking, there isn't a lot of very definite different categories for frogs and toads. Tadpoles in particular. Tadpoles, they start as an egg, then they have kind of like this stumpy body with the tail, and over the course of 7 to 12 weeks, will grow legs and arms and start going. They'll go from a vegetarian diet of little plants or algae in the water, and they will, he just jumped out of Rosalie's hand. They will go and they'll start eating crickets and small bugs. You can see his little pouch on the front of him there. That's what he will use to make some noise. He likes you guys a lot, apparently. He thinks you're very cool, and we'll say goodbye to him now because apparently he needs to go explore. So when they're adults, toads generally have bumps on them, and frogs generally have smooth skin, but not always. There are instances where frogs have bumps and toads have smooth skin. So they're all in the same family called Anura. There's a lot of crossover, but we generally think of toads as, they live on the soil, they're not climbing trees, and the tree frogs and water frogs have their skins, and that's how we generally tell the difference.
Miss Amanda, there's another question. How do you know if it's a girl or boy?
There's not an obvious way to tell the moms don't care for their babies. They lay the eggs and then they leave, and there's nothing really coming out of the frog that tells you if it's a boy or a girl. I'm not an expert at telling that. They're pretty tricky to tell apart. So let's learn a little bit more about the environment where tadpoles in particular need to live, and I will go ahead and share my screen so that you can see what I see. All right, and we'll present here. And okay, so there's a tadpole on the screen with little legs, and there's an environment that is a very good one for a tadpole to live in. You can see that the water is very calm. It's not running very quickly. They don't have other fins besides their tail, so tadpoles need pretty calm water in order to make it. They need cool water, which is why a nice shady environment is a better setup for them. And they need a lot of oxygen in the water because at this stage, they breathe through gills, although they also have the lungs that they will have when they are frogs. So where does the rain go? Where does the rain come from? The rain comes down from the mountains, and you can see a little bit of a stream here, and it runs off the land. It goes from any high points, and it goes with gravity and goes down into a little rivulet, a ditch, a puddle, and if it has places to move downhill, it will go into bigger and bigger streams and rivers, and eventually into larger rivers. And then over here we have an ocean, but in our case, a lot of the water goes to the Chesapeake Bay, which is this big shape right here is the Chesapeake Bay. And here is where we live. We're in Maryland. MD is what that stands for. And you can see other areas that are north and that are south. These are all, each color is a different state. And all of those lands drain. The water runs off of those lands into the Chesapeake Bay. And they call it runoff. That is the term that scientists use to call all that water coming from the land and going into the water. So here we are. Here's our big shape. There you can see all that mud there. Can anybody tell me what you think that might be? All that darker color? What is that? Water down here is sort of blue and green and a little bit more watercolored. But up here, what do you think that might be? Any guesses? All right, well, we're gonna do a little experiment and see if we can figure out what all that stuff is. So here is a slide. I'm going to have you come back to me, and I'm gonna do a little experiment with you so that you can see what all is coming off of the land and into our water. Okay, so I have a vase of water here. It's nice and clean, and you'd think that this was what water should look like. But when the water runs off the land, when it comes down to rain and trickles off, it picks up everything that's in its way. So that could be, I don't know, that could be, let's say it just picks up some twigs and some leaves that come off the land and go into the water. Oh, there we go. We have twigs and leaves, and it's rumbling down the stream, and it's moving through things, and it kind of gets stirred around. It's leaves and sticks. Kind of stays at the top, the bottom of it, pretty nice and clear. Maybe there's some food drifting in. So this is a good thing for all the critters and fish and tadpoles that live in here, because maybe some plants get in there, maybe some bugs, maybe some nutrition for the animals that live in the water. Now let's imagine that there is a big thunderstorm and it washes down huge amounts of water, and you could see the water coming down your street, and it's really moving fast, and maybe it even moves the trash cans or there's puddles forming in people's yards and the water is just moving. Well, then if it runs through, let's say a construction site, a place, or even somebody's garden bed where they've just put out a bunch of mulch or a bunch of fresh soil, what can happen is that all that rain will take that with them. And then we have a lot more coming into the water. And that's still pretty natural, but you can see that underneath here, that water is looking a little bit gray. It might be hard for our tadpoles to see when they're in the water. And then let's say they pick up some fertilizer, some stuff that people put on their yards to make the grass beautiful, and they make their plants grow really big, and it's so fun to watch your flowers bloom and grow really fast. But fertilizers can get washed off also. And those, because they're meant to feed plants, tend to dissolve in the water. And I'm not gonna, there we go. You can see the darkness there. Look at that. Our frog really cannot see anything there. When people put things on their lawns, like fertilizers, or in a lot of situations, they put on some pest control stuff too, which means that it's chemicals to hurt the mosquitoes or the bugs that live in their yards. A lot of people aren't comfortable with bugs, but all those chemicals can come down onto their yards and wash down into streets and into the rain and get into the water where our tadpole lives. And eventually it'll wash down even further into the Chesapeake Bay. So as an environmentalist, you always want to be aware that you never want to put anything in your yard that isn't natural. So chemicals are not the best thing to put. Even if you want your flowers to grow beautifully and you don't want to be bitten by mosquitoes, which are all understandable, you want to remember that anything you put out there is going to eventually get into our water and hurt some critters downstream. So it's one of the things we want to avoid. So any questions before I go back to my slides?
I saw a couple of questions. One question, actually you already answered part of the question, what impact will water quality do to frogs?
Well, so one of the things that I didn't mention before, but toads, for instance, they breathe through their skin, they drink water through their skin. They don't swallow water like we do, they don't drink it. They absorb it through their skin. They have bigger pores and it goes right into their bodies to rehydrate them. So these chemicals can get inside them, and there have been instances where the eggs that those frogs sometimes will lay will have, they won't live. So it can hurt the next generation, and sometimes it can paralyze some of the tadpole's functions depending on what kind of chemicals they're exposed to. So it can have a range of impacts to our tadpole friends. And of course, all of our animals in the Chesapeake Bay, like great, crabs and fish and skates and, herons, anything that then eats those tadpoles, the food chain all the way up, can absorb some of these chemicals, and it can hurt their natural life needs, the things that they need to do.
And
So,
Ms. Amanda, we have another question asked earlier. It's about American toad you showed to those children. The question is, do we have a cage for him to live in?
So because I haven't been to the office in quite some time, because we're all stuck at home a lot, right? I had to make do. I had to use a plastic Tupperware that was big enough that I could have them, and Rosalie took them out to put it all back together. But we put some dead leaves in there and some live vegetation, and we also put a little bit of water just to sort of give him that muddy feeling. We gave him a little container of water, a little bowl for him to sit in, and we gave him 3 worms since last night to make sure he was not going to go hungry. And Rosalie will let him go this evening when it gets a little bit darker and cooler, so he can hide and go back to his life in the woods.
We should never try to keep a frog.
So, and we also, I should mention, made sure he could get air. We put little matchsticks as wedges along the Tupperware top and bottom so that air could get in, but that he could not get out. But he's a fighter, so he will be happy to get back out and into his froggy world, his toad world, I should say. Okay, I'll go back to sharing my screen. I saw somebody who said that they want the dirt away. It's not pretty. I don't disagree with you. We'll put him over there. Okay, so lots of stuff in our waters, some very natural and healthy that is good for the critters, and some that people put in there that we want to avoid doing. Why are you not? Sorry. Okay, I seem to have frozen there. Okay, we'll try that again. Share. It is not letting me. Okay, so we can do some things to help our water not pick up and carry everything in its path when it goes off the land and into our streams and rivers. One of the best things that you can do to help clean up the environment, if you're worried about people putting stuff in there that isn't good for it, is you can plant something. I have seen so many families planting and putting seeds in the ground and maybe making some garden for a vegetable. There's so many wonderful plants that you can put on any land that you have available. The landscape can be a green filter. What it does is those plants that you put in the ground grow roots, and those roots allow the water an entrance into the soil right here. And when the water can go into the soil, it actually gets cleaned through that process of going into the soil. So the more trees and shrubs and bigger plants we have that have those nice deep roots, the more the water can soak into the soil and get cleaned before we drink it and before it goes into a stream or anywhere else. It slows the water down when it's trying to come off the land and into the stream, and it has the land soak it up instead, which is good for the water, it's good for the creatures, and it's also really good for our houses so that the water doesn't flood like that can happen. I think you all may know about Ellicott City. In some places where there aren't enough places to slow the water down, that water can rush into a neighborhood that is not where we want it to be.
But the old Ellicott City flood.
Yep, it did. Was that your question? Did it flood?
Ellicott City.
He's saying that.
City.
So Ellicott City has been flooded a couple of times recently, and they're trying to come up with a plan so that it doesn't flood again. And one of them is taking about half of that land and making it into an area with a lot of plants that could absorb all that water, could soak that water up into the land instead of having it run down the streets. So what could you do? So here we have a situation, a school. Many of you, I know you missed your schools. This is a school that has not been very imaginative about the way it uses its playground, and maybe it's not being taken care of. We have some trash down here. We have just plain lawn, maybe some pavement, and we have the water dripping out of the rain gutter here and just going onto the ground. So let's see if we can make that scenario better by changing things around a little bit. Oh, look, we even get color. So we add some shrubs here, a little planter garden. This is a rain barrel where the water is now going from, that comes on the roof and comes off of the side of the building. And that water can be held and you can use it to water the plants. We're adding more plants along here and along the edges of the the land, which means that all that water that comes off of your roof has a place to get absorbed into the land, which is great. And then we have more vegetation growing. We have a trash can so that people have a place to put their trash. And even the dirt and the sand here is a better situation than pavement because the water can soak in and there's going to be less water coming off of the land and into our waterways. And you can do that in your front yard. This person has done a bit project, but you can see that this could have been all grass, but this person has decided that they're trying to absorb some of that water, so they're planting bigger things that will slow that water down. And you can see it's all downhill, so the water is going to be invited to go follow gravity into that little well of all these beautiful plants. And then I would just throw in a little bit there that if you are going to do beautiful things and plant gardens, you might as well try to plant things that the animals in Maryland really want to live in. So you want to plant Maryland native plants, which means they didn't come from Europe or Africa. They didn't come from anywhere far away. They grew up, this is where they've always lived, and this is where the animals know how to use those plants and flowers to eat their nectar, to eat their seeds. They are adapted to work well with each other. So if you want the squirrels and the bunnies and the raccoons and the hedgehogs and the American toads and the frogs to be happy, you want to make sure that you're giving them plants that they know how to use. So Maryland native plants. And then here's someone who has decorated a beautiful rain drainage system. You might have seen these on your streets, maybe in the neighborhood. Maybe yours aren't painted, but there's a cement block here, and then underneath this is where the water drains. Well, that water goes right into a stream. It goes right into a ditch and then into a bigger waterway eventually. So this is a reminder for people not to put anything into the ecosystem, to the environment, into their yards that won't be good for streams, for frogs. And this looks like a red newt here, which is a salamander. It's another kind of amphibian we have in our streams, because we all want to make sure that we are supporting our wildlife, our native wildlife. Oh, okay, and then here's a bigger example of, this is some farmland. Farms can be a place where people do put a lot of chemicals on their lawns because they want their plants not to get eaten by bugs and to grow big and strong, which a lot of farmers in Maryland are doing a good job of being very responsible about not putting too much on the land. And these guys are really responsible. They're planting all these trees here, which will slow the water coming off of the land and then will allow that water to soak into the earth instead of rushing right into this river where it might harm the frogs and toads. Instead, it's getting stopped by these trees here. And it's creating that shady land, that shady stream that we want for our frogs and toads and fish and other critters that live in the water. So these are all, we have this big term that we use all the time that you probably will hear if you ever come visit us at the Howard County Conservancy, called slow the flow. So we always want to be doing that to slow down the water that's coming off of the land. Here's an example of all those nice deep roots soaking up that water. Oh, and I did want to show you one cool thing that engineers have put together to clean up some of that water that is coming into the rivers and streams. I don't know if you have seen this, if you've been to Baltimore, but this is called Mr. Trash Wheel. And this is one very clever way of cleaning up some of the garbage and trash that comes into our waterways. And I'll show you just a little video here, and we'll play it. There we go. So see how he's got these boons off to the side, these things right here, which are gonna catch everything that comes down that's on the Jones River, and it stops all that trash that's floating on the top. And it actually has all that trash, and I thought that this video was gonna allow me to show you that this right here, these are conveyor belts. This is like a little escalator like you see at the mall, and the trash comes right up these stairs, and this is moving like an escalator, and it gets dumped down into a big trash dump, and it gets emptied regularly by the city. So back here we have all that trash getting piled up and put into a dumpster just by this very simple but very clever machine, and it is solar powered. So if there are any engineers in the house, any people who want to go up and create cool solutions, Mr. Trash Wheel is probably a very good one to check out. So that is my presentation to you today. I wonder if you have any questions. So I see, why is the water running? Not sure. The water just, when it comes down, when the rain falls, unless it can soak into something, it will just slide off land. We call it running, but it's really just kind of trickling down, and it always goes downhill. If you dump water onto a hill, it will automatically go downhill until there's enough plants or places for it to soak in. Well, thank you guys. You were amazing listeners. I do have one last slide just so that you can see where we're coming from today. And that is the Howard County Conservancy. We hope you come visit us. There we go. There's one of our barns on one of our pieces of property. We are open to welcome you if you want to come and walk on our pathways and to visit our goats and see the frogs in our stream. It is open to the public, and we would love to see you guys come visit us. So I guess I'll hand it back to Dr. Yun.
Thank you, Miss Amanda, and thank you, Miss Janice, for the great talk. And we really enjoyed to seeing the tadpoles and the American toad. I saw there are some questions asked earlier today. One question is about how can we keep grass grow well naturally without chemicals and fertilizers?
Well, there are actually, I didn't put this slide in because I thought it would be a little complicated, but there are plants that you can plant near your grass or near the plants that you really love that will invite the bugs to come to them instead. So there are, I'm not very good at these, but there's companion plants that if you plant them near each other, you will invite some of the bad pests to go to that plant instead. Janice, do you have any of the names of those that are good companion plants? Janice is a phenomenal, she knows every plant in the world.
I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, and there really isn't anything for grass and lawn. Grass and lawn is not native to Maryland, most of the lawns that we plant. So that's why they need fertilizer to grow here, and lots of extra water that we don't generally get from the rain. So that is one problem that we have with grass.
We do try to encourage everyone who is willing to try to go a different direction to maybe have a little bit less lawn and a few more trees and shrubs that are native to Maryland to help all of our natural creatures who live here and to help slow the flow. Anybody else?
Yeah. Any questions? You can type in the chat. If not, thank you, Miss Amanda, and thank you, Miss Janice, for the really interesting presentation.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting us. It was very nice to meet all of you. And we will see some of you, I think, next Thursday also.
Yeah, next week, Miss Amanda will be talking about pollinators, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And we'll all learn more about what that is.
Yeah.
Next
Please
week.
come join us next week. The
Thank
same
you very
time,
much.
Thursday at 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.